Huge thank you to CIBC for making We Get It possible. Hi, welcome to a new episode of We Get It. My name is Erin Roman. I'm the Program Director with Young Adult Cancer Canada. Thank you for joining us for this new episode. This season, we've actually changed things up a little bit, as you will notice. We will bring you every week, every Monday night, 7 p.m., we will bring you sessions that we have recorded and edited from our past events, sessions that are with amazing health professionals and friends across the country, some stories from Yackers as well. And we will talk about issues that are, we know, real things and real issues for the young adults we work with, and for topics like fear of cancer recurrence, body image, movement and exercise, mindfulness, legacy, palliative care. We are going to touch on a bunch of content. So we hope that those sessions are going to provide you with information and tools to help you live life and love life, and hope you get to join us every week and share with anyone who could be interested. So let's start now with this next episode of We Get It. Enjoy.
My name is Erin Roman, and I'm the nutrition team lead at InspireHealth. So InspireHealth, for those of you that are not familiar with our organization, we are a nonprofit. We were founded in 1997, so we've been around for a little while and have gone through quite a few transitions, actually. We're partially funded by the Ministry of Health here in BC. About half of our funding comes from the Ministry of Health. And the other half, we rely on donations from the community, as well as other grants and fundraising efforts that we do, events through the year. We don't have any cost. There's no cost associated with our programs or our services. We have 3 kind of brick and mortar offices. So one in Vancouver, that's our main office, one in Victoria on the island, and then one in Kelowna up in the Okanagan. And then we have this virtual center that we've been using a little bit, and then in the past few months, we've been using it a lot. And I'll describe the services that we're now offering online, which is wonderful here because I think there's people from across Canada joining us today. So all of our services are open to all of you. So please, if you have any questions about that at all, I've left my email at the end, and I'll talk you through how you can access our services as well. So what do? We support people with cancer, anyone or if you're at high genetic risk for cancer, and their families or support people. So it can be at any stage of diagnosis. So I tuned into the last session with Jeff, and I think our mandates very much align. InspireHealth and YAC, we see anyone at any stage of diagnosis. We could see you 10 years post diagnosis or just recently received diagnosis. Our programs and services really emphasize evidence-based lifestyle approaches that support quality of life and well-being, and overall we really focus on stress reduction is really our main mandate. Our team consists of physicians. So our physicians are GPs, they're medical doctors trained in family medicine. They aren't meant to take the place of a family doctor, but they're really meant to be there to support you through talking through diagnosis, treatment, reports. First initial consultations with our physicians are 90 minutes long. So when was the last time you got to sit down with a physician for 90 minutes? So it's quite supportive, and they're also patient-centered and heart-led, so they're quite fantastic. We have clinical counselors, where our lovely Genevieve leads that team, exercise therapists, and registered dietitians and nutritionists. So today, we'll get into InspireHealth again a little bit near the end, but today, I thought we'd talk about nutrition. I know a lot of people have a big interest in nutrition, and it's also something that we see can also be a place of vulnerability, especially after a diagnosis. So just keep that in mind today, and that we're here to support you after today as well if anything comes up during the presentation for you. So I asked previously for some questions to come in, and I think there was over 50 questions that came in about a week ago. So thank you for those that submitted questions. And there is a wide range, but I tried to arrange some of the themes that we'll talk about today around those questions that came in. So there was some questions around like inflammation and anti-inflammatory foods, cancer protective nutrition, vegetarian, plant-based, a lot of questions actually around vegetarian and plant-based eating. And then budget and time considerations. Those were the big ones. And then we're also going to look at mental health and well-being, how that can affect how we're absorbing our nutrition, but then also how nutrition can support our mental health and well-being. And at the end, how we at InspireHealth can continue to support you after today. So nutrition is pretty complex. When we think about it, every body is different. And many patients have a lot of different circumstances happening that could be affecting their nutrition and nutrition recommendations that we would give to them. Whether that be side effects from medications and treatment, which we know all patients experience those differently, preparing for surgery or being post-op. So there are actual nutrition recommendations that can really help with healing from surgery or actually getting ready for going into surgery. Your health history, so whether there are any other conditions or allergies or intolerances that might affect your nutrition, accessibility to foods, accessibility to services, digestion and bowel health. We're very comfortable at InspireHealth talking about bowel health, especially within our nutrition team. It's so important. We hear a lot about detox out there in the Google land of health and wellness. And that's our body's main source of detoxification is through our bowels. And so if there is any issues with our digestion or how we're digesting the food that we are eating, we're really here to support you through that. It's amazing to me how many patients come through our doors that have had chronic issues with digestion, and just with a few tweaks, sometimes it's a little bit more than that or a longer journey, but there are some really great nutrition guidelines that can support getting your bowel health back to normal. Mental health and well-being, and again, vice versa. So mental health and well-being can affect our digestion, and then as well, the nutrition that we put into our system can also have a positive effect on our mental well-being as well. We'll talk about that a little bit more too. Sleep, stress, and hormones. I have a lot of patients that ask me like, Erin, why are you asking me about my sleep? Why are you asking me about my stress levels? Like, what does this have to do with nutrition? Can we just get back to talking about nutrition? But really, the physiology around how our body works and how our hormones work, including the stress hormones and including like how our sleep can affect us in our day-to-day being, it really actually does affect how we make the most of the food that we eat. So how is our sleep? How is our stress? Food can also play an important role of supporting our sleep as well. And then just that mindfulness and that gratitude, having our food and how it can actually help with digestion. It's so intricately tied together that the nutrition approach at InspireHealth especially looks at the whole picture and the whole person. Because if I were to tell you, oh, you should have salad for lunch, and then, you should have some beans for dinner, but then that didn't support you or didn't feel well with your digestion and actually like upset your tummy and you actually couldn't sleep, then those nutrition recommendations aren't actually that helpful for you. So I really like to take that whole person into account. And relationship with food. So this is a big one. Relationship with food really starts at a very young age. We are given messages around food from quite a young age. And this is something that I think we could all kind of tune in with and work on over our lives and just be aware of how it can affect us. So we won't get into this too much today because it is so complex, but it is something that we're definitely here to support you with at Inspire, or I can point you to resources to support you with that as well. So again, we can have one-on-ones at Inspire. So our first initial conversations are 75 minutes, and then we have unlimited follow-ups with our patients for nutrition. So whether that's if you would like to talk to someone about cancer protective nutrition, or you're getting ready for treatment and you'd like to know what foods you could eat before treatment. And then as you're going through treatment, that might change. Your appetite might change. There can be taste changes with certain medications. There could be digestive upset. And so we're here to support you really through it all. We offer workshops and cooking classes. So these are all currently happening online and accessible to everyone online. We have a really great database of recipes online, which I'll show you later as well. And then some of the topics that you could see us address through our organization are things like digestion, the microbiome. There's lots of news around the microbiome these days. Again, side effects and how to manage them for treatment, how to support your immune health. Nutrition can play a key role in supporting your immune health, mental well-being, whether there's any disordered eating patterns happening, supporting a specific diagnosis. Actually, different cancer diagnoses can actually have different nutrition support that can be helpful. And then specific diets. So we get a lot of questions around the keto diet, intermittent fasting, plant-based diet, you name it. Actually, I think we've seen it. Sometimes I need to do a little bit of research, actually, because there's so many out there. So we're here to talk you through that as well. We don't ascribe to any one diet at InspireHealth. We're really here just to support you with what feels right for you. We're not the diet police or a Poponut, as I found on the internet. We are here to listen, and we're here to support with the best evidence that we have, and to try to take away the good and the bad of foods, and to see how the foods that you want to eat can fit into your lifestyle and support you in the best way. So a bit of an exercise. Okay, so first memory. I just want everyone to take a minute to think about your favorite food. And then when did it actually become your favorite food? And when was the last time that you ate that food? Can you think of a memorable bite? So this might not be your favorite food, but just a memorable bite of food that you had. Were you alone or were you with others? Okay, last one is that I want you to think of a juicy slice of lemon. Visualization here to help you through it. And I just want you to visualize yourself biting into that sour lemon. As you're doing that, is anything happening in your mouth? There might be like a tingling happening on your tongue. You might be creating actually like a little bit of saliva without actually having anything in front of you or even a piece of food around you. And the reason why I bring these up is to, and we'll get into this a bit more as well, but there's so much that goes into why we eat the food that we eat. And sometimes we simplify nutrition as being like calories or vitamins, but really like food is memories. Food is family, food is friends, food is travel, food is shared. And then also food is this like physiological, really interesting, sensual experience, such as this lemon analogy. Sometimes food just draws us in because of our experience with it. And we can't often explain it. What are some reasons why we eat? Like, why do we eat? So there's like energy, hunger, pleasure, social. Hopefully we'll have more of that soon. I know you guys on the East Coast are getting a little bit more social time than we are out here. But cultural reasons why we eat, celebration, boredom, emotions. I always think this is a really important one. Emotional eating gets a really bad rap, and we all do it. So, we're taught as very young children to seek comfort when we're sad or when we're mad or when we're happy, and food is a comfort to us. So there's one thing that we're here to support you with in terms of perhaps finding other tools if you're uncomfortable with the fact that there's some emotional eating happening. But also I think there needs to be a recognition that it is normal and that all of us really do that, that food is intricately tied with emotion. So we're here to support you with that too. So what's available to you is a huge factor, and then nourishment. So fun fact. So I'd like for you to place these carbohydrates. We're gonna get a little bit more into macronutrients here. So put these carbohydrates in order of highest amount of vitamin C. So what we have on our list is we have a cup of kale, 1 orange, half a cup of yellow pepper, a green chili, and 1 kiwi. So half a cup of yellow peppers gives us about 157% of our daily values. So the daily value is basically what Health Canada has deemed the amount that we should have of vitamin C. After that comes the green chili, which is wonderful, although I don't know anyone who sits down and eats a whole green chili pepper, but it gives us 121%. A cup of kale, then a kiwi, and then an orange. So the reason why I put this up there as well is to tie back into childhood and those messages around nutrition that we get. So we're all told that orange, and then I know like through social media, then kiwis really got a bit of traction because people are like, oh, a kiwi has more vitamin C than an orange. But we really do tend to hang on to a lot of nutrition information that we receive when we're younger. And nutrition information has really evolved over the years too. So we're also here to be your filters and your encyclopedias and your Googles for nutrition information. But it's just interesting to me how there's variety that we might not be aware of. So carbohydrates, let's talk about macronutrients. We have our 3 big macronutrients. We have carbohydrates and proteins and fats. So carbs, what do you think about when you think of carbs? Lately, they've been the bad guy in the nutrition world. For a long time, fat was the bad guy. Now it's carbohydrates' turn. So carbs are our main source of energy for our body. It's the preferred source for our brain and for our body. We use it the most efficiently out of the 3 macronutrients. So whole food sources, we always think about breads and because of what we've associated carbs with, even the word carb versus carbohydrate. But whole grains, baked goods, fruits, vegetables, and then our beans and lentils actually, they are a bit of both. So they teeter on the line of carbohydrates and protein. But all these foods are considered carbohydrates. But we tend to put judgment on carbs quite easily. Now, what about protein? Protein breaks down to amino acids in our body, and those amino acids make up all things structural. So when we think of like our muscle and our skin and our hair and our bones, but also things like our immune cells and our digestive tract. So a lot of people don't realize that. An example is when you're preparing for treatment or you're preparing for surgery, and we want to make sure that our immune system is nice and robust. We usually actually bump up our protein a little bit beforehand so that we can boost up those immune cells that we have. A lot of people think about vitamin C for immune health, maybe some zinc, but protein is actually quite essential, the amino acids that it breaks down to. Meat and eggs, fish, and then beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, dairy alternatives, grains, and also nutritional yeast is an interesting one for those that are following a plant-based diet. It can be a good source of protein. And then fruit and vegetables. So fruit and vegetables also contain good amounts of protein. So as long as we're incorporating like whole food sources of fruit and vegetables, it's also a great source of protein. Now, what about fat?
What about fat? The avocado,
Mm-hmm.
macronutrients, satiety oil, avocado, butter, coconut oil, chocolate, fish, slow sugar digestion, fat is flavor.
Great. Oh, great answers. So fat, every single one of our cells has a lipid layer, so a fat layer. So fat is essential. And we actually saw a lot of issues that happened when the whole low-fat diet craze was really popular, kind of maybe amongst like our parents' generation where low-fat was quite popular. We ended up seeing quite a few issues with health because of that. It's really important with hormone regulation. It's a great energy source. It helps us to absorb certain vitamins and minerals. I heard someone say satisfaction. It actually is our satiety macronutrient. So if we have a meal that doesn't have enough fat in it, usually our brain isn't really signaled that we've been satisfied with that meal. So I see this quite a lot when we see like a very clean, quote unquote clean or quote unquote healthy lunch, say a salad and with just fruits and veggies, and there's not really protein, and there might not be a dressing on there, and then I hear like I'm just starving like an hour later or half an hour later. And it makes sense to me because there hasn't been the fat, and it also doesn't really have the protein involved in the meal to actually help us stay full and feel full, but also for our brain to be signaled that we're satisfied with it as well. And insulation for our bodies. Whole food sources, and these are more of the like the omega-3 or the monounsaturated, the more cancer protective fats that we're seeing here. So nuts, seeds, avocados, fatty fish, eggs, olive oil, all those beautiful oils that we can now get. Butter as well, in terms of, especially if it's like a grass-fed butter, can be higher in those omega-3s. So that's something that is a bit of a bigger discussion, but around like omega-3s and omega-6s. But just to put it simply, we get a lot of omega-6s, especially if we have animal fats in our diets. We need omega-6. We also need omega-3. And we tend to get a lot more omega-6 than omega-3. Like kind of 25 times more usually in the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. And we want a little bit more, like 10 to 1. So those omega-3s are everything that we just listed. So getting in those nuts and seeds. If you eat fish, fish is also a really great source, especially if it's like a salmon or a mackerel or a sardine. Those are really high in those omegas as well. Later on, we're going to talk about some good practical tips for each meal as well, in terms of how to incorporate these into our daily nutrition. So I'm going to get a little bit nerdy with nutrition physiology. I like to get a bit nerdy with nutrition physiology. So blood sugar balance, which the feedback usually that I receive is, but why do I have to think about blood sugar balance? Like, I don't have diabetes, I'm not pre-diabetic. This is actually just great basic nutrition knowledge for all of us to learn. Even I wish that this was in elementary school curriculum, just so that we would know a little bit about how foods break down in our body. So this is like a bit of an exaggerated, perfect blood sugar balance during the day. No one's blood sugar looks like this, but just to suffice to say that it's just like a wave. We're going to wake up, our blood sugar is going to be low. We're going to eat something, our blood sugar is going to raise, we're going to use up that fuel, it's going to come back down again, and then we'll eat something again, same during the day. So it's going to be a wave depending on when we eat and how much we eat and what we eat. What we want to avoid is our blood sugar is going too high or too low. We don't always feel our blood sugars getting too high, but a lot of us are quite sensitive to low blood sugars. My partner tells me that I get hangry when my blood sugars get really low. I beg to differ, but to disagree. But we might get shakes, or we might feel a little bit faint, or we might get hangry. We might actually see some shifts in mood if our blood sugars get too low. So we're going to talk about how to avoid that. And when we're looking at actually like the cancer environment, we also want to avoid those highs and lows, because what happens is when our blood sugars rise too quickly and drop too quickly, our body gets a little bit confused about the amount of insulin that is produced in our body. Why are we concerned about too much insulin being in our body? Well, when there's insulin in our body, we've seen more inflammation happening in the body. And we know within the cancer environment, we want to try to avoid inflammation within our body. So how do we do that? So let's go back to those macronutrients. So we have our carbs and our proteins and our fat. So carbs in and of themselves are broken down a bit more quickly, and that makes sense, right? When we think about when we have like a piece of bread, or when we have a piece of fruit or some vegetables on their own, it doesn't really keep us full for that long. It gives us nourishment, but it doesn't necessarily keep us full for very long. If we add a bit of protein, and usually when we look at the protein sources, there's fats that come along with, nuts and seeds and meats and beans, lentils, sometimes there's some fat there, but usually with a sauce, there's usually some fat. And then that can really slow that process down. Fiber is the other thing that can also very much slow that down. So this makes sense, like how much digestion needs to happen when we're having a piece of meat, when we're having nuts, we really need to chew it. It's more substantial. We feel fuller for longer, that kind of thing. Carbohydrates are the thing that we've kind of played around most with in the food system, right? So carbohydrates, we've really processed them. We've broken grains down, like a whole grain to a flour. So if we think about our body like a machine, not to get too like industrial, but if we think of our body like a machine, if we have to do the breaking down, then it will take a little bit longer, right? But if there's been a couple of machines ahead of us that have already broken down that grain to that flour, and then even perhaps like broken down that flour even more to like a fine powder, then that's going to affect our blood sugars a bit more quickly. We don't have to do as much with it as we would if it were like a whole food. And that those foods can still fit. And let's think about how we can slow them down. So here's an example. I apologize, it's a little bit blurry. But the red line that you'll see, let's just take as an example like a bowl full of jelly beans. Okay, so bowl full of jelly beans. I've yet to find a jelly bean tree in my travels. And so it's pretty refined. It's pretty processed, right? And there's a lot of refined sugar within it. So we know that our body is going to take that into our cells quite quickly. It's going to give us a lot of energy quite quickly, and our blood sugars, because our body isn't necessarily meant to digest that quickly, our body lets out a little bit too much insulin at times. So our blood sugars will rise quite quickly, and then they fall quite quickly. Then take something that's a little bit less processed, so a piece of toast, just a bowl of rice, which we don't often eat, but sometimes, just some white pasta on its own. Again, it's pretty quick because it's still a bit of a refined product. But then if we took like a whole grain or fruit and veggie, some of those legume carbohydrates, then those are a lot slower. You'll see that blue line. So this doesn't mean that, the bowl of jelly beans necessarily or the pasta doesn't fit. What we can do is add protein, add enough protein, add in some fat or some fiber to really slow that down. And when we get into the practical tips of breakfast, lunch, dinner, and some snacks, I'll show you how we can do this. And this can be quite transformational for folks, especially in terms of cravings, I find. And if we're noticing that for a lot of patients that come through the door in the afternoon, sometimes that's when that craving happens, or mid-morning is when a big craving happens. And there's a lot of shame and guilt that comes with cravings, I find, because usually our body is asking for something sweet or salty. And that's not because we're addicted to sugar, or that's not because of anything like morally wrong with us. That's just physiology. That's because we may not have had enough protein, we may not have had enough fat in our last meal, or fiber in our last meal, or we might just have a craving. We all do. It might just simply be a craving for chocolate, and that's just what it is. And if that happens all the time, it might be great to look back at our previous meal to say, did I have enough protein with that meal? How could I maybe boost that? Could I have maybe had something that had a little bit more fiber so that I felt a bit fuller longer? Because the reason for that sugar and that salty craving is that once our blood sugars drop really quickly, our body wants them to rise back up. So again, it's just physiology. It's just what's happening within our body, and we really shouldn't have any guilt and shame about that. And if you want to look at that, talk to me. We're here. There are very simple ways that we can balance out those meals. Meals should really last us about 3 hours unless we're having issues with our appetite or side effects of treatment. But meals should generally last us between 3 and 5 hours. It's totally fine to have a mid-morning snack. It's totally fine to have an afternoon snack if you need it. It's great to listen to those hunger cues. It's also great to have an awareness of how those foods are breaking down and supporting us at the time. Does this make sense? Thumbs up? Yeah? Okay. So alongside with cravings, blood sugars, I think that there's also a very supportive role that nutrition can play when we're looking at mental well-being. When we're looking at what happens with mental well-being, cancer, and nutrition, we see a lot of patients that come in, and we know that there's a huge effect on our mental well-being after a diagnosis. There can be a lot of mistrust of the body. And when it comes to nutrition, we also see that sometimes that sense of control can translate into nutrition. And there's so much information on the internet. Like if you Google nutrition and cancer or food and cancer, I looked this morning just to see the latest, and there's like 850 million websites, like 850 million hits just for nutrition and cancer. So how do we sort through that? How do we not feel overwhelmed? So who hasn't had a very well-meaning friend or family member give you nutrition advice since your diagnosis? It's very common. And again, it's a way that we show love is through food. We show love through nutrition advice. It's odd, but it's a way that family and friends show us that they care, is by giving that input at times. And I've had patients say that they found it very supportive to say, I have a dietitian I can talk to about that. So thank you, but no thank you. So always feel like you can use me as your filter, as your protection against that information, because it can be overwhelming, and I think that's putting it lightly at times. And it's such a vulnerable place to be, and that can affect our eating patterns. And going back to even that blood sugar balance, we've seen with many patients, that sometimes that means eating less food, which can affect our mental well-being overall, or we end up eating more food and with some shame and guilt associated with that, and then that cycle perpetuating itself. So just know that there is support for that, and there's support to look through that and to see how you can actually look at both sides of it and how they're affecting one another. So when we're looking at stress, this is one of the images that we use at InspireHealth. Stress is normal. Stress can be very healthy for our body. We need stress in our body. We need to be able to react. When we need to react, we need our heart to pump a little bit faster. Mine was pumping pretty hard before this presentation, so that meditation really helped. So that's an example of a tool that can be helpful for us when our stress is feeling high. But there's also this mechanism of knowing that there are stresses that we can control and there's stresses that we can't control. And that within itself is a bit of a stress reducing strategy. I think about it as building your toolbox of stress relievers. Not everything works for everyone. So for one person, they may go back to a childhood habit of drawing or doodling, and that might work for them, but for someone else, that might not have any effect for their stress levels at all. Eating might really help someone, or cooking or eating with others, but someone else might be a little bit more introverted, and that might not help them as well. So I always encourage building that box of and trying different things to see what works for you. This can be really helpful when we are looking at emotional eating. If you resonate with that, if you're recognizing that a lot of times that feeling of being out of control perhaps with food might come up, please do talk to us, because there are some strategies of before that food comes to us of trying to find the breath, trying to find a sense of calm, and not allowing yourself to have the food, but trying to again build that toolbox of stress relievers that can help you. Are there ways that you can reframe, decrease, or process them? And that's why working at InspireHealth has been so lovely, because we have such a great team, whether that's exploring movement with our exercise team or counseling. Again, it's that toolkit. So when we look at stress, that animation came up wrong. When we look at stress and how it affects the gut. So as I said before, they're intricately tied. When we look at cortisol levels, that's our stress hormone, when those are circulating a little bit higher than what we would like in the body, this makes sense when we look back at the saber-toothed tiger analogy of stress and what happens in our body when we need to fight, flight, or freeze, or when we need to rest and digest. Our blood actually shunts from our digestive system when cortisol levels are high. So this makes sense when you think about traveling. When we travel, we kind of have this low-lying stress of getting to the airport or getting to a place on time. And a lot of people when they travel deal with constipation. It's very common, and it's such a good analogy for looking at, or not a good example, sorry, of what happens when stress and digestion just don't really mix. And I've seen this over years of when there has been low-lying levels of stress, which, again, going back to Faisal's lovely chat right before this one, that fear of recurrence that can kind of just be in the background, and how that can actually affect our digestion and how we're using our nutrition. And vice versa, there are some ways that we can feed our microbiome. So the gut microbiome is this lovely relatively new research field of looking at our gut and all the little bacteria that inhabit it. So there's about 5 pounds of bacteria that live in our gut. 5 pounds of little guys in there. And there's about 1,000 strains, between 500 and 1,000 species of bacteria that live in our gut is what we've seen in the research. For a long time, we've talked about probiotics, but the newest research is actually showing us that if we have a pretty good system happening in there, a pretty good microenvironment, like they're saying the best approach now is to feed those little guys. So how do we do that? That's basically through our plant foods. So that's basically through our fruits and vegetables and beans. We'll get into that a bit more. So your microbiome profile is really as unique as you are. We're learning so much more in this field, but I thought it was really interesting to bring up during this talk, just because we know that exercise or movement can affect our microbiome. What we eat, our lifestyle, stress can really affect that microbiome as well. And I don't want to stress too much within this talk in terms of it becoming stressful, that you're thinking, oh dear, I've had low-lying stress in my life. How has this affected my digestion? We can build it up from here. It's never too late when it comes to, your microbiome or addressing those stress levels, or looking at strategies of during the day, what you're eating and what you're doing can support moving forward from here. Those breathing techniques are just so powerful. We can kind of immediately feel our heart rate drop when we're doing those meditations and slowing down our breath. And the same goes for nutrition. So there's always room to rebuild and build upon what you've already done in the past, and that's really what we're here for. And to me, it's quite exciting, but again, I nerd out on nutrition physiology. So fun fact, so serotonin, which is a chemical that is involved in many processes in the body, but we all kind of know it as our happiness hormone, but actually it's a chemical, but involved in hormonal processes. But did you know that 90% of serotonin is actually made in our gut? So the majority of our happiness chemical is made right there in the gut. So this to me is a huge and such a great a backup in terms of what we're feeding our gut, what we're putting in there, and another reason to really look at how can we support it as best as we can. And this doesn't mean perfect nutrition in any sense of the word, but this means increasing our awareness of how we can just support those little guys to create as much of that happiness chemical as we can. It's not this simple. All of our happiness doesn't come from our microbiome, but just that chemical itself. I think it's a fascinating discovery that they've made in terms of that connection between our gut and our brain. So how can we support it from a nutrition standpoint? How can we support that connection? They call it the gut-brain axis. There's such an intricate tie. So anti-inflammatory approach, what is that? So that's looking at those foods that we talked about earlier, those omega-3 fats. So that's nuts and seeds, fish, if you eat fish, whole foods really are microbiome. Again, they really like whole foods. Does this mean that you have to go out and buy fresh produce by the bucketfuls? No. I'm a big fan of frozen foods. I'm a big fan of frozen fruits and veg. I was just speaking with someone this morning about how, we're getting into a season where we can buy locally if possible, maybe not yet in Newfoundland, but we're starting to here in BC. Where we're starting to see some lettuces and things at the farmer's market, and we can start growing here, which is a great way. But in those times when there isn't the accessibility, frozen fruits and vegetables usually actually have more nutrition than what we can buy from the store if it's been shipped from far away. So the reason for this is that they usually have to pick produce. If it's coming, say, from Mexico or Florida or Cuba, they usually have to pick it before it's ripe and then ship it up to us. Then it kind of ripens on the way, but without the sun. And the way that it really gets that nutrient density is through the sun. So when we have frozen fruits and vegetables, they're usually picked when they're ripe, and then they're frozen right away. So don't be scared of frozen. Don't be scared to stock up when frozen fruits and vegetables are on sale. They can be they're just as supportive to everything that we're talking about as fresh produce really is. Balancing blood sugars, as we were talking about before as well. We really want to try to avoid those crashes during the day in terms of our blood sugars and how that can affect our overall mental well-being. Green leafy vegetables are also fascinating in terms of the nutrition that they provide. So this is spinach. Frozen spinach is great. Fresh spinach that you can grow I just have some growing in a pot in my backyard. It's pretty easy to grow as well. Green leafies are quite hardy. And they give us a lot of good fibers for that gut. Our microbiome, so we discussed those prebiotic and probiotic. So don't feel like you have to go out and buy a probiotic. Really, the research is now saying that for those that have been taking the same probiotic for a long time, that might actually not be as beneficial as we once thought. Again, if you've been eating a variety of foods, you probably have a pretty good micro environment for those probiotics, and it's just great to keep feeding them. Some of the things that they really love are fibers. So again, that's from like our fruits and our vegetables and our grains. And things like garlic and onions are like superfoods for those little bacteria. Sleep. Again, we were discussing sleep earlier. Sleep can be so supportive for allowing ourselves, again, for that like rest and digest period. But sleep is also quite fascinating when it comes to nutrition. An example is that if we don't get enough sleep during the night, sometimes that can increase our hunger hormone called ghrelin, which I find fascinating. I learned about this after I had a baby and then realized how hungry I was and did a little bit of research and found out a bit more about like sleep deprivation and how hungry our body gets, because it's kind of our body telling us, well, if you're not getting nourishment through sleep, then you will get nourishment through food. So again, it's just an awareness of what's happening with our body. There's also ways that nutrition can support sleep. One of the ways is magnesium foods. So foods that contain a good amount of magnesium can be really supportive, as it's a mild muscle relaxant, magnesium is. So foods that contain magnesium, such as like dairy products, contain a good amount of magnesium. Some fruits and vegetables, certain fruits and vegetables contain magnesium, and they can kind of get us into a better place for sleep at times. Stress, we discussed stress. So how can we support that? Slowing down, finding mindfulness in eating and cooking. I've been finding it actually really great during this time of how many different cooking videos, short videos or long videos have been posted online. It's great to try to get back into the kitchen at this time. I've been baking a lot of bread, which everybody else has been doing too. And I was curious about it, about why everyone was baking bread. I've been kind of playing around with sourdough, and I find that process quite creative. And then I was looking into some research, and they found that it actually has been helpful as a therapy. So baking bread in and of itself, and like using our hands, seeing a product come out at the end, that it's quite grounding to get in touch with our foods. And I think anyone who's done any kind of like berry picking or like mushroom collecting or fishing, or, you know, like collecting your own foods, really does help with that sense of connection, and really slows us down and makes us realize like the nourishment, and I think be a little bit more grateful for the nourishment that those foods are giving us. So whenever we can get involved in the preparation of food or the collection of food, I really encourage it, because it really enforces that message of how connected we are to it. And of course, this is in addition to any medications or lifestyle factors, counseling, or recommendations from your GP and doctors as well. Another fun fact. So I would like for you to guess, Canadians spend approximately how many minutes a day eating? So the average is about 60 minutes a day that we spend eating. Now, what about the French in France? They spend about double the time eating that we do. And so we all know that this doesn't necessarily mean that they're eating more. I take this as that they're eating slower than we are, that they're taking more time to eat and digest the food that they're making. So I think this is a really great point in terms of hitting on how can we do this? How can we slow down? I think sometimes we don't even realize how quickly we're eating. For some of us, with, you know, if you have a really busy life, or you have a lot happening, eating might not mean a whole lot to us at the moment. So, you know, sometimes if we're distracted while we're eating, there was a really interesting study that showed that, you know, if we're watching TV or watching something else while we're eating, that we can actually take in about 30% more food than if we were not distracted while we're eating, which is quite a lot more. And it makes sense. Like if I've gone to the movies and I have a bag of popcorn and I remember like the first bite, but I don't remember the rest, you know, like I knew it's probably delicious because I kept eating it, but because my brain is distracted with the movie, I don't actually recognize the fact that I've eaten the whole bag. Our brain kind of can't take in both things. So a couple of strategies around slowing down is just to take, again, a couple of breaths before eating, perhaps taking Genevieve up on her meditation and that gratitude before eating. just to get those digestive juices flowing. Just by thinking about food before we eat it can actually promote that digestion to start. Chewing is another thing that we've stopped doing as much. And it's one of the first things that I look at if there is anything happening with the digestion of a patient, is like, how much are you chewing? Would you say that you chew your food quite a lot? And it's like, oh, I haven't even thought about it before. If we're in a rush, we tend to just swallow, maybe a couple of bites and then swallow. So it can be an interesting practice to take a food and mindfully chew it, 10, 15 times before swallowing, just to see what that feels like, and to see if that actually might cut down on any bloating or gas that we might actually encounter after we eat. Another strategy is to just put your fork and knife down. So just consciously, while you're eating, chew. While you're chewing, putting our fork and knife down. It's just to bring a bit of mindfulness and to recognize that sometimes we just sit with our fork and knife just in our hands, and we just eat until we're done, and then that's it. So just trying to slow down, having some compassion for self. I really appreciated all the compassion themes that were happening with the agenda. So congratulations to Yak on that, because it really infuses into nutrition as well in terms of self-kindness and self-compassion. We have to eat. We have to eat several times a day. It's such a beautiful opportunity to incorporate some mindfulness into our day. If mindfulness or gratitude is a new thing for you in terms of practicing doing it deliberately, when we eat or before we eat is a great opportunity to do that, because we do have to do it. So why not bring that practice in at that time? So now we're going to get practical. We're going to go through each meal of the day with some examples of how to incorporate everything that we've talked about so far. So breakfast. So trying to incorporate oats into breakfast is a great idea, whether that is through oatmeal. Overnight oats is actually another craze, but it's great because you can actually make it the night before and not think about it. I have recipes for all of these, so if anyone is interested, just reach out to me. At the end, you'll have my email. Granola is another way to get oats in. So the reason why I'm a big fan of oats is that they're a great soluble fiber. So if we have anything that we're concerned about with our digestion, especially with our bowel health, oats can be very healing for our bowels and a really good way to get fiber in. We should have, so women in Canada are recommended to get about 25 grams of fiber, men about 35 grams of fiber, and North Americans in general get about 10 grams of fiber. So when we're looking at cancers specifically of the digestive system and bowel health especially, fiber is intricately tied to our health overall. There's actually a new study that just came out around fiber and breast cancer. And you would wonder, what's the connection? But actually fiber and having regular bowel movements actually within that detoxification process can help us actually lower the amounts of estrogen in our body when we have excess estrogen floating around in our body. It's really quite fascinating. So fiber is huge. And I'm going to show you a really good resource in terms of fiber too. Balanced smoothies. So I have a lot of patients that have smoothies for breakfast, which is wonderful. It's a great way to get some nutrition in. And we also want to make sure when we're thinking back to those blood sugars that it's not all just fruit, which is fruit is wonderful. We're getting great nutrients, but it can be a lot of sugar, natural sugars, but a lot of sugar at once. And this is why when we look at juices versus smoothies, I really like smoothies unless you're going to have a fresh juice with food, with some vegetables or with some fiber and some protein. But ways to balance out a smoothie is by throwing in some seeds, throwing in tofu, throwing in yogurt, just to get a little bit of protein in there as well. Chia pudding is an easy one that you can kind of set in the fridge overnight, and it's quite affordable. If you have a bag of chia, you could just add some milk or milk alternative. It's got some great omega-3s, great protein. Eggs and beans, like a Mexican style breakfast. You're getting great fiber, great protein. Egg cups. So egg cups that you would just bake in the oven, and you can even freeze them and just warm them up when you're ready. Again, a great way to put some protein. I know for myself, I grew up with a lot of carb heavy breakfasts. So whether it was toast and jam, oats on their own, but when we look at oatmeal, I should have said this earlier with the oatmeal, we also want to make sure we're adding in some protein. So again, like nuts, seeds, peanut butter. Peanut butter is a really great way to mix that in with like peanut butter, banana, and some oats. So delicious. Tofu scramble is another example. If you're more plant-based or vegetarian. Lunches, some ideas for lunches. So leftovers. We tend to get a good amount of protein with our dinners. So don't be scared to have leftovers for lunch. It's a good way of not having to think about what protein you're going to have. Things like bean dips and hummus. Sandwiches are wonderful. We just need to make sure we're balancing out the carbohydrate in the sandwich with the amount of protein that we're having in that. So whether that's meat that you're having in your sandwich, or an egg salad, or a tuna salad, or a tofu scramble within it. And again, I'm here to support you through that too, but just finding that balance. And how do you know? Like, how do you know if you have a good balance? It's looking ahead a couple of hours. So what did you feel like at 3? If you had your lunch at 12, what did you feel like at 3? Were you really tired? Do you get that afternoon slump? Were you having some cravings? And then let's look back to see how we can boost it up. I take an approach to nutrition that's a bit more additive than it is to take things away, because I really think a lot of foods can fit. It's just how can we make them fit to best suit our body. So let's look back and how could we boost that up? Maybe we needed a little bit more fiber, maybe we needed a little bit more protein, or some of those phytonutrients from fruits and vegetables. Bean salads, I think, are great. Bean salads can last like 3 or 4 days in the fridge. So if you make a batch on Sunday, then you have enough for most of the week. Soups. In the wintertime, I really love to have a soup exchange with friends. So we just each make a big pot of soup. We put them in containers. We trade them. That might not be COVID friendly at the moment, but when we're not so worried about COVID, just sharing it around, then you can have some, especially if you're on your own, I find it's great to just have some soup in the fridge that someone put lots of love into, and you're not just eating your same soup for 2 weeks in a row. It's a nice way to share food. Pre-cut vegetables and fruit. So I have a great guide around how best what vegetables keep in the fridge and how best to keep them in the fridge. So maybe like a Sunday afternoon, you could prep a lot of food for the week. I know this is quite helpful for a lot of patients that I've seen. So whether that's like, roasting some root vegetables that you've had, whether that's like sweet potatoes and beets and carrots, maybe roast them up, and then you have them in the fridge. So you can just throw them in as your side. You can throw them into a salad. You can heat them up again. You can make a soup out of them. Making the best use of that batch cooking time on the weekend. Trail mix as a side to get a little bit of protein in, especially if you're going a bit more plant-based. And then I have some great recipes for like seed crackers. So again, it's not that carbs can't fit or other crackers couldn't fit, but if you want to make those a bit more nutrient dense, then there's some great recipes out there for just adding in some economical seeds and nuts into the carb. Dinners. So prep, again, I found it quite supportive for patients to really take maybe like just a couple of hours even on a Sunday to prep for the week. That could be making like a pot of a grain. So I encourage folks to play around with different grains, because there's so many great grains out there like farro and quinoa, brown rice. I'm blanking at the moment, but there's lots of different grains to play around with. So if you have a pot of grain in your fridge, that could last for 3 or 4 days. You've got some roasted veg in your fridge, then you basically just have to think about a protein. Sometimes I play around with making a couple of different dressings. Again, I have tons of recipes if you would like them. So a couple of different dressings. So then again, you're not eating the same thing every single day. So if you're used to eating a lot of animal proteins, great. We don't ascribe to just one diet. We know that there's a lot of benefits to plant-based proteins, because of the fiber that's within them, and then also those great phytonutrients, which basically means like plant vitamins that are found within like beans and lentils. So if that's new to you, a great way to experiment is to sub out half of your meat for lentils. So whether that's in making chili, or if you're making your spaghetti sauce, or you're making tacos, so you're used to making like a ground meat taco, just throw in, like, cook up lentils. They're kind of the easiest way into the whole bean and legume world. Cook up some lentils. They only take about like 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes, and then throw that in and do it half and half with your beef. So you'll have the same flavor, and then you'll get that benefit of that extra fiber in there too. Experiment with spices, creating those simple dishes. Like I love making like a big pot of dal or some hana masala. There's such great cultural dishes that are bean and lentil heavy that are really, really quite delicious. Things as sides like a cabbage slaw can last for days in the fridge, and you're getting quite a lot of those plant nutrients from dark cabbages like the dark purple or the dark green cabbages too. Breakfast for dinner is another great option if you're bored with your usual fare. And again, that roasted veg idea as well. So snacks, what to do for snacks. So we tend to reach for carbs, like we talked about before, for snacks, which is fine. And there are ways that we can have snacks that can be a little bit more nutrient dense. So popcorn is actually a very high fiber snack. It's usually what we put on top of popcorn. That might lead us down a feeling a different way about it, but it's a fine snack to incorporate. And if you're plant-based, I would recommend putting some nutritional yeast on popcorn. It's a great way to get some B vitamins in, and a wonderful crunchy snack to have. Energy balls, which we have some recipes on our website for energy balls that are quite delicious. So what are energy balls? It's just basically a combination of some fiber and some protein and some nut butters to really make you feel sustained and full with them. Chia pudding, seeds. So seeds are a really great way of incorporating nutrition in an economical way. I brought some, I'm a big fan of chia. So this is like a big thing of chia that I just like keep on my counter so that I know that they're there and I'm reminded that they're there. I also keep a big container of so these are hemp hearts. This is the big thing of hemp hearts. I've gone through quite a lot of them. But again, you're supposed to keep them in the fridge, but I keep them on my counter so that I am reminded to just add them into whatever I'm making. So I add hemp hearts into salads, into yogurt, on top of pizza. They're a great way of getting in that omega-3 and also some protein. Some other ideas here are just yogurt dips, edamame, peanut butter and banana ice cream. I don't know if you've ever made ice cream from frozen bananas, but it's a great way of then adding in some peanut butter, some nuts and seeds for some protein, and it's quite delicious if you have a blender. Okay, so some affordable suggestions. We went through a couple of them here, but I just wanted to give you a couple of ideas for things that you could have on hand that aren't too expensive, that you can kind of add into anything, and that are just a great way of getting a boost of fiber, of good fats, and protein. So chia seeds, like I showed you. Sweet potatoes are a really great option if you're used to eating a lot of white potatoes. Sweet potatoes are a great way to boost up the nutrition and the fiber. There's a lot more fiber in sweet potatoes than white potatoes. Again, not that you can't have white potatoes, but if you're looking for a way to make a meal a little bit more nutrient dense. Flax seeds are another one. I have a lot of patients that come in and they're like, oh yeah, I sprinkle flax seeds in my cereal. I sprinkle flax seeds into my yogurt. So the one thing with flax seeds, they have so many benefits for us, including great oils that are quite beneficial, good fiber, but the shell that is on a flax seed is quite hard. It's actually so hard that our digestive system can't break it down. So best is to get your flax seeds and just grind them up in a coffee grinder, in a spice grinder. You can keep them in the fridge that way. You can whiz up a whole bunch and then just sprinkle it in. Frozen dark green veg. So whether this is just a package of spinach, you can get a lot of frozen kales and things now too, if you don't want to commit to buying them. I find them quite expensive in the grocery store to buy dark leafy greens, so I usually buy mine frozen and then chop them into an omelet or eggs, into a spaghetti sauce or a chili. Apples. Apples are a great source of fiber, great source of vitamins, usually pretty easy to get our hands on and a great snack. I usually, if I have this for a snack in the afternoon, I add a little bit of protein. So whether that's just a little bit of nut butter, some hemp hearts on top, you're getting those omega-3s, and it's a great filling snack as well. Green tea. So green tea is pretty economical. And we know that it has like quite a few phytochemicals in it, those plant chemicals that can be quite beneficial, especially the antioxidants. Quinoa, hemp hearts like I showed, lentils, berries, oats, cabbage, beets, and then grains in bulk. So if grains are new to you as well, playing around with different grains, always feel free. It's a bit trickier now with COVID, but you can buy them in smaller amounts and just to try them out. So whether that's like wheat berries or farro, or I mentioned a couple earlier too, but just try them and see if you like them. They tend to have a good texture and a nuttier flavor usually. So overall nutrition recommendations is that when possible, whole foods are wonderful. Our body recognizes them and assimilates their nutrients easier. It recognizes it. Look for a variety and color and boosting up your meals. So when we're talking about those phytonutrients, those plant nutrients, it's quite interesting when you're looking at things like antioxidants and knowing what vitamins are in certain produce. But a neat way is to think of the rainbow in terms of different colors actually usually indicate different vitamins within fruits and vegetables. And usually the darker that fruit or vegetable is, the higher the concentration. It's quite neat. So just a way to incorporate this is to look at your plate. Like how many colors are on your plate? Sometimes our plates can be quite beige, but it's quite nice to look down and say like, oh yeah, I have like 3 or 4 colors on my plate, which beige is one of them, which is totally fine. So just thinking about getting a bit more variety that way. Plant-based options. Again, if plant-based is new to you, plant-based doesn't necessarily mean vegan or vegetarian. It's often used in that context, but plant-based to us means that we're just trying to get more plant-based options into our diet. If that's new to you, there's lots of resources out there that can support you, including us. With that, like how do I sub out meat for beans and lentils, or how am I making sure that I'm getting enough protein, or how am I making sure I'm getting calcium? That is something that I have seen quite often is when there's been a switch out. An example is for plant milks. So if you've ever made your own plant milk, say you make your own almond milk, wonderful, like creamy, delicious, so great. And it's not that high in calcium because it's actually just the essence of the almonds when we're making it. So we're not necessarily getting the calcium that we would be getting in dairy milk, and then we're not getting the fortification of the vitamins that we get from our milk. So it's not that we can't have that, but we're here to support you in terms of like, okay, where else are we getting calcium from? Where else are we getting vitamin D from? How can we get that in if we're choosing not to have dairy in our diet, which is great and totally fine. And how can we just make sure we are fitting everything in? Including those protein, carbs, and those protective fats, kind of whenever we have a snack or a meal is wonderful. Hydration. So I didn't even touch on hydration, but hydration is quite important. Making sure that we feel quite hydrated during the day. So what does that look like? We can get quite used to being dehydrated if we haven't consumed a lot of water in the past. But hydration can actually be linked with anxiety and mental well-being. So if our organs are not kind of working at their optimal level by being a little bit dehydrated, then we can actually see that within our mental well-being as well. So just trying to keep how much should you drink, that's depends on the person. I tend to say, look at your pee. So it's a great indicator. So we're going to wake up, our urine's going to be concentrated, it'll be darker. And unless you're on some medications that affect the color of your urine, just aim for a lighter color, like a lighter lemonade type color. As long as it's light, then you're doing okay. If it's darker, it's a good reminder to try to go and have a glass of water. And then reach out for support. These talks are always, I find, tricky because it's like, how do you touch on everything? How do you try to touch on everything in like an hour and a half? So I wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of a few of the physiology pieces, and then so that you know how we can support you moving forward. So ways that we can support you is that we can see you over Zoom or phone if you don't live in British Columbia, or we're not seeing anybody at the current moment. So everyone is being seen on Zoom or phone. Again, we have physicians, our nutrition team, exercise team, and counseling. We do have some really wonderful online group classes that are happening right now. And I'll show you where to find those on our website. in a second, including like yoga classes, meditation classes. Genevieve has been leading some really wonderful, inspired conversations. And then we have some nutrition workshops, and we're going to have some cooking classes coming up. So you can go right on our website, and this is where you can actually, to access our services, all you have to do is just register online. So you can go to programs and get started. And you can sign up as a patient right on our website right here. So you would just go on, register, and then once you're registered, you can actually sign up for all of our classes. So our classes can be found under our online center. So just to give you an idea of what kinds of classes that we have coming up. We have 3 or 4, sometimes 5 classes a day. So whether that's an exercise class, meditation, nutrition, fireside information session is a really great way to just get started. It's just a bit of an overview of who we are, but you have a bit of an idea today after meeting with me of who we are. But please feel free to peruse our website. I'll show you too where the recipes are. So if you go under resources and then recipes, you'll find a plethora of plant-based recipes on our website. And I wanted to show you a couple of other websites that I find helpful for recipes. So Minimalist Baker is one of my favorites. I find her recipes quite simple, and they're always delicious. And they're mostly plant-based, but she also has like chicken and fish and beef recipes as well. Oshi Glows is another. So Oshi Glows is fully vegetarian. So if you are curious about some tested, tasty vegetarian recipes, I recommend Oshi Glows. Food to Glow. So this is if you've been recommended to be on a low fiber diet. So we see this oftentimes with any kind of cervical or bowel cancer diagnoses. There's often a recommendation for a low fiber diet, and that can be kind of overwhelming because you're kind of told to just go back to like white rice and white toast and don't eat a lot of fiber, which seems to counteract what the rest of the world is telling you that you quote unquote should eat. But Food to Glow, Kelly does a really great job in terms of finding delicious, still like very nutrient dense, low fiber foods. So that one's a great resource. The American Institute for Cancer Research, I find is a great resource for nutrition as well. They're a bit more conventional, but they do have some great resources such as looking at specific ingredients like coffee, which most patients ask me if I'm going to take away their coffee, which no, because there can actually be some benefits to coffee and some antioxidant benefits to it as well. So AICR is great. And then I really actually have been liking this Ryvita, I'm not sponsored, but this Ryvita website in terms of increasing fiber-rich foods. So it just gives you some ideas of how to, it's a pretty fiber-rich cracker, but also how to just like play around with it in terms of recipes and including nutrients that can be supportive. Ryvita is a big supporter in terms of bowel health in the UK. So I do like what they've done in terms of resources for patients. I hope that this felt supportive. I hope this felt helpful. And I hope to hear from you or talk to any of you at any point. And thank you so much again to Yak for this opportunity. And hopefully we can meet again.